This is an article by Robert Hunziker, which I haven't really read much by Robert Hunziker lately. This is from May 22nd, 2020, 10C above baseline. And, 10C is the end of everything we know. Straight up. There's nothing going on any level that will be anything like we know at 10C above pre-industrial. 10C, Earth at 10C above pre-industrial is unimaginable. It's a deadly, horrifying thought, but as shall be explained herein, it should not be dismissed out of hand. The following story might be labeled as reckless, and it might be criticized as fear-mongering, a fear-mongering piece of journalism, and probably will be. Nevertheless, 10C above baseline explores a dystopian world envisioned by John Doyle, Sustainable Development Policy Coordinator of the European Commission in Brussels. Doyle's thesis of a 10C world within current lifetimes is based upon sober-minded analysis. Of course, it envisions a planet of few or maybe no humans. Granted, it is hard to believe, very hard to accept. Whereas the Paris Agreement of 2015 officially set goals amongst the nations of the world to employ mitigation measures to hold global temperatures to 2C, but preferably 1.5C above pre-industrial, which is mid-18th century or 1750s, except for the IPCC measurement purposes, which are markedly different from the 18th century pre-industrial baseline, to wit. The baseline period from which climate change is expressed has also moved on. A common baseline period of 1986 to 2005 is used throughout. That is very, very different than 1750, consistent with the 2006 start point for the RCP scenario. He says. Meanwhile, 1.5C has become a cause célèbre among climate activists, but here's the rub. In order to stay below 1.5C, greenhouse gas emissions like CO2 need to fall off a cliff, decreasing by 15% per year starting in year 2020. Hey, in 2020, emissions went down by 17% because, accidentally because of a pandemic. But if we're wondering how we're going to do that, that's how. We've already been shown the way. That's how. Are we going to do that? Nobody knows. Categorically, that's impossible to achieve for a host of reasons. Not impossible, actually, just shown. Not so long ago, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change released a special report about 2C versus 1C, 1.5C. Its findings were grim, namely at 2C, rather than at 1.5C, the danger to ecosystems increases several fold. As things stand, the world has a comfort zone of 1.5C to 2C, with 1.5C the clear preference, but still, at 2C, all kinds of bells and whistles go off. E.g., 1, severe heat events increase by 2.6 times, the wet bulb temperature impact 2 times, vertebrate species loss, and 90% coral reefs gone for good, et cetera, as key ecosystems that support and originate life suffer. Keeping in mind, lest you forget, that there is no planet B. So then what of 10C? John Doyle, a climate resilience analyst, has studied the climate system and discussed findings at a UN aid agency's meeting. John Doyle, Sustainable Development Policy Coordinator of the European Commission, Information Society and Media Directorate General. Doyle is working on mainstreaming sustainable development in the Information Society Directorate General, with special emphasis on business partnerships to address energy and climate security. Really, a synopsis of Doyle's disturbing analysis and speech follows herein. In brief, Doyle's presentation consists of horrifying expectations. More to point, Doyle's presentation is a daunting wake-up call above and beyond all wake-up calls, as video recorded by scientistwarning.org, Stuart Scott, Executive Director. One of the video PowerPoint headlines boldly proclaims, "Science, we're heading fast for 10C degrees. 4C is extinction." Doyle says, roughly speaking, you've been told that we may be heading for 1.5C or 2C degrees above pre-industrial temperature. That's not true. That's basically very old science, and it's essentially inaccurate. There isn't a single independent scientist of the world that would support that position now. I'm going to read that again. There isn't a single independent scientist of the world that would support that position now. We're actually heading for 10 degrees warming. That could happen within 20 to 30 years. And on the way to 10 degrees, we pass 4 degrees. Now, 4 degrees is interesting because that's extinction for our species. So keep that one in mind. I'm not just making this up. All of which prompts a question along the way to 10C. When does 4C happen? If 10C is the docket within 20 to 30 years, as explained by Doyle, then it's probably safe to assume 4C within 8 to 15 years. Ooh, ouch. I added the ouch. Regrettably, that's within the lifetimes of pretty much the entire world population, now approaching 8B, or billion. Talk about impact. Predicting a 10C, and that's why, I'm going to stop right here. That's why I say we are not going to make it to 9 billion people. We are not going to make it, to whatever, future scenario that people like to map out. Like, how are we going to feed the world at 10 billion people? We're not. We're not going to feed the world at 10 billion people. We're not going to get to 10 billion people. That's just not going to happen. So, entertaining those scenarios is ridiculous. Predicting a 10C uplift in global temperatures beyond pre-industrial is a stunning proposition. Absolutely stunning. Indeed, his speech is a death-defying prognostication, but truth be told, nobody will believe it. A review of literature of other climate scientists adds some dimension to Doyle's work, to wit, in December 2019, the Potsdam Institute for Climate Research, one of the world's premier climate research orgs, caused an international stir with a paper published in Nature, Climate Tipping Points, Too Risky to Bet Against. A very interesting statement is found within the Potsdam paper as follows. The Earth system has been unstable across multiple timescales before, under relatively weak forcing caused by changes in Earth's orbit. Now we are strongly forcing the system with atmospheric CO2 concentrations and global temperature increasing at rates that are an order of magnitude higher than those during the most recent deglaciations. Atmospheric CO2 is already at levels last seen around 4 million years ago in the Pliocene epoch. It is rapidly heading towards levels last seen some 50 million years ago in the Eocene, when temperatures were up to 14C higher than they were in pre-industrial times. Here's more Doyle. Since the last International Panel on Climate Change Assessment report, AR5, was published, all of this has come to light since then. We've realized that we have been living in a fool's paradise, thinking that nice, gentle reductions in greenhouse gas emissions and maybe changing to electric cars should see us over the bump. This is simply not the case. I'll read that again. We've realized that we have been living in a fool's paradise, thinking that nice, gentle reductions in greenhouse gas emissions and maybe changing to electric cars should see us over the bump. This is simply not the case. Doyle's outlook darkens as he declares the geoengineering concept of sucking CO2 out of the atmosphere nowhere near ready for deployment and likely not possible because of the second law of thermodynamics, which essentially says you cannot build a machine to clean up the mess you're making with the machine. Heaven forbid people are depending upon geoengineering to bail us out. What if it doesn't? Here's more Doyle. In the last 30 years, we've been able to measure that the total amount of vertebrate life on this planet has collapsed by 99%, and what's left, at least from the tiny human being up to the big elephant, are found loads of cows, loads of humans, and virtually no wild animals. It's way worse than that. There are no wild animals. There are no fish. There are no insects. Your microbiome inside your own body is collapsing, at least 20 to 30% down over the last 20 to 30 years. We are not on the verge of the sixth mass extinction. We are in the middle of it and very likely to be part of it. Additionally, the wet bulb temperature effect received mention. This gives you the temperature that living creatures can survive. On the left-hand side, you can see 42C, which is 107.6 Fahrenheit degrees. Human beings can easily survive well over that, but there's a catch. The fittest human being on the planet, even if he is in the temperature of 36C degrees, where there is 100% relative humidity, he dies in 6 hours. I was in a city, Brussels, in Europe in August. The temperature was 36 degrees and the relative humidity was 40. It only needed to be 1.5 degrees higher and about 20% extra humidity for tens of thousands of people to be dying on the streets. Doyle provided additional evidence of the ongoing extinction event. Flying insect populations have crashed by 80% in Europe over the past 40 years. We don't survive without insects, no questions asked. But there is one question. What causes 80% of flying insects to drop dead within half lifespan of an average human? Something is horribly wrong. Solutions: eliminating fossil fuels in enough time to stem excessive warming will not work for numerous reasons. Not only that, fossil fuels account for approximately 80% of all energy production, and there's no way that'll change soon enough to help within the next 10 years. As an aside to Doyle's terrifying speech, according to the IEA, fossil fuel producers like the US, Russia, UAE, and Saudi Arabia plan on increasing oil and gas production by 120% by 2030, continuing to emit CO2 of ever higher levels, bringing on more blanketed heat. And China is embarking on, mega construction of new coal-burning power plants, and so is India and Japan. Recently announced its intention to build 22 new coal-burning plants, 22 in Japan, coal-burning plants over the next 5 years. 5 years. Holy shnikes. Continuing to emit CO2 in ever larger numbers, bringing on more blanketed heat. All of that in the face of irrefutable evidence of acceleration of climate change well beyond the influence of natural events. Maybe the world really is crazy after all. According to Doyle, the only option for getting out of this mess is to stop pretending that we are going green. To survive as a species, we must switch. This is very important right here, right here. We must switch to local production and forget globalized growth. It's over. The economic growth paradigm of neoliberal capitalism is incompatible with human survival. I'm going to read that again. The economic growth paradigm of neoliberal capitalism is incompatible with human survival, especially for life-supporting ecosystems. It is worth noting that two respected French climate research organizations reached conclusions somewhat similar to Doyle's, but with much less gusto in their numbers. The National Center for Meteorological Research and Institut Pierre-Simon Laplace Climate Modeling Center in Paris contend if CO2 emissions continue business as usual, then temperatures could increase by 7°C by 2100. Okay. Still, it is incomprehensible, not impossible, that temperatures skyrocket to 10°C over the next 20 to 30 years. Is Doyle's assessment realistic? What if it is? Yet Doyle's thesis need not be 100% correct to disrupt and destroy ecosystems and cause panic among humankind. If he is 50% correct, large portions of the planet become uninhabitable. That's just for starters. And if Doyle's daunting analysis is only 25% correct, hard-charging 2C plus circumstances will change life forever. Less agricultural land, higher tidal flooding, and eco-migrants by the hundreds of millions roaming countryside in massive waves of human flesh searching for anything edible. Indeed, it's always instructive to look at other viewpoints. For example, the prestigious Met Office Hadley Centre UK, assuming business as usual, expects 4C by 2055. That's more than enough to do the dirty work. Again, 4C is extinction. So 2055 is only 35 years away. And what happens between now and then? An international panel on climate conference at Oxford University conducted a program entitled 4 Degrees and Beyond that examined the likelihood of 4C if business as usual. Their conclusion: half of the planet turns uninhabitable. All of which highlights a problem. Business as usual is thriving. Already looking past the speed bump of COVID-19, according to Mauna Loa Observatory, Hawaii, CO2 emissions for the month of April 2020 were 416.18 parts per million versus 413.52 parts per million for the month of April 2019. And we've already reached 418, almost 419 parts per million. And for added context, readings of 371.66 parts per million were recorded for the month of April 2000. Business as usual has not slowed down one iota in 62 years, ever since Mauna Loa Observatory started collecting CO2 data in 1958. Noticeably, it has already accelerated, plus 60% this century. Maybe Doyle is onto something. Well, that was good and doomy. Guys. Whew. I feel my head is spinning a little bit. Just reading that. Yeah, so that's what's happening. That's reality. So let me go back to the point he made about emissions having to fall off a cliff, as in 15% per year starting this year. So here is the solution. We have been presented. We've been shown. We've actually lived the solution over the last 3 months or 2 months, whatever it might be, due to coronavirus. We've already been shown the solution. So, why not encourage enthusiastically on some level people understanding and realizing that this is the necessary action in the face of climate change that we need to take as a civilization, as a species, as a global organized humanity. We need to shut shit down. Shut it all down. Exactly as we have shut everything down in the face of coronavirus. We need to shut shit down. It is the only way. I can't say anything else. I can't say much more than that. Hey guys, please remember to like, share, and subscribe. You can also support the channel at the links below. PayPal, Square, and Patreon. Also, all of my live streams are available for listening on Patreon if you happen to miss them during the day. So you can sign up for my Patreon for as little as $1. If you want to go check out the live streams, they are all there. Thanks a lot.